A year ago today, Defense Minister Anita Anand delivered an apology to survivors of sexual misconduct in the military. She promised things will change in the Canadian Armed Forces. What has and hasn't changed in the years since her apology? Well, in May, retired Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour tabled a third report into the military. Her damning report issued an urgent call for action. Arbour's report made 48 recommendations. At the time, Minister Anand initially accepted 17 of them, and today she accepted the remaining 31. Some of those recommendations include moving criminal code sexual offenses into the civilian courts and conducting a review into benefits, disadvantages, and costs of military colleges. But does the government have timelines in place to make Arbour's recommendations a reality? Let's find out. Joining me now is National Defense Minister Anita Anand. Welcome, Minister. Thank you so much for making the time today. I wanted to start with one of the key recommendations from Madame Arbour's report. It's recommendation 5. It says that criminal code sexual offenses should be removed from the jurisdiction of the Canadian Armed Forces, and in all cases, they should be prosecuted in civilian courts. Now, both you and Madame Arbour note that this could include amendments to the National Defense Act, which could take years. Now, without a clear timeline, what do you say to victims who continue to say that the process is taking too long?
Well, thanks, Mike. I have reached out to victims and survivors prior to today, and I want to say that my intention and expectation is that the Department of National Defense will implement not only recommendation number 5, but all 48 recommendations. And indeed, my tabling of the response to the Arbour report today in the House of Commons is fulfilling one of those recommendations. And in fact, if we step back, it is important to note that on every single recommendation today, we have implemented and shown Canadians our path forward. And we will continue to come back and update Canadians on the work that we are doing to implement the Arbour recommendations quarterly from my department, as well as through the external monitor, Jocelyn Terrien, whom we appointed pursuant to one of Madame Arbour's recommendations as well. So we are going to continue to grow confidence in the Canadian Armed Forces by fulfilling the recommendations that Madame Arbour has outlined.
And part of that confidence, I would assume, does come from the fact that 57 cases are under civilian jurisdiction. However, there were 40 that were declined. Now, in some instances, the civilian side has not been able to take them on. And when you consider the backlog that still exists in civilian courts, mostly because of the pandemic, are you not concerned that many of these cases will still end up in the military system?
The very purpose of our accepting and implementing recommendation number 5 is because of the continued push for us to move cases from the military to the civilian justice system. We know that there may be hurdles, such as cases which rest outside the jurisdiction of Canada, such as the continuing need for collaboration and cooperation with the provinces and territories. So while we move forward in the transfer of cases, we will continue to implement the broader recommendation number 5, in order to protect the rights and the interests of victims and survivors.
But them not being immediately transferred, or even that number that were not transferred, does that not create a chilling effect for victims?
What it does do is exemplify for us the need to implement recommendation number 5 and the need to ensure that the rights and protections that are afforded to victims in the civilian justice system will be available to them. And so while we are implementing the interim recommendation that I accepted within days of being appointed as Minister of National Defense, we will also implement recommendation number 5, again, in the interests of victims and survivors. There are multiple systemic changes underway. These are complex, but my intention at every step is to get it done.
Another part of the recommendation says that if the offense takes place outside of Canada, military police may act in the first instance to safeguard evidence and to start an investigation, but they should liaise with the civilian enforcement as soon as possible. How do you go about building an infrastructure that will work with other legal systems around the world?
This is a very good question. Part of the complexity of implementing the Arbour report recommendations is to ensure that we are liaising with international authorities and provincial and territorial authorities to ensure the smooth transfer of cases within and outside of Canada. And what we are going to be doing is striking a provincial territorial table so that our officials can cooperate and collaborate with provincial and territorial officials to smooth the transfer of cases from the military to the civilian justice system. But again, the expectation is we will continue to move forward and implement the recommendations of Louise Arbour.
One of the other major parts of her recommendations was that culture change from the ground up. She wrote at length about the Royal Military Colleges, saying there are legitimate reasons to question the wisdom of maintaining the existence of these military colleges as they currently exist. One of the recommendations which D&D is working on is a review board that could start its work in 2023. Now, that board will look at the benefits, disadvantages, and costs of the colleges. Do you have a timeline from where that review should be concluded and then acted on?
That is recommendation number 29 in the report, the undertaking of a review of the military colleges, which I specified would occur in response to Madame Arbour's recommendation number 29. We are striking this review board as soon as possible, and we are making sure that there is a review of the colleges as Madame Arbour recommended. Once again, Mike, I want to take a step back and understand that there are 48 recommendations in the Arbour report, and we are presenting a roadmap forward on every single one of those recommendations in order to ensure that cultural change in the Canadian Armed Forces does occur, and in order to ensure that we are building an institution where everyone who decides to put on a uniform in service of this country is protected and respected when they respect and serve our country every single day.
So how do you push back and change that culture when you consider that Madame Arbour did say the military colleges appear to be institutions from, quote, a different era with an outdated and problematic leadership model? Does letting them, I should say, continue to operate right now actually undermine that culture change that you're looking for?
Well, Mike, we've already begun some processes of reform in the military colleges. For example, in the exit surveys. For example, in ensuring that diversity and inclusion is part of the training at the colleges. So it is not lost on us that reform needs to occur, and we are starting already with that reform. I'm the chancellor of the military colleges. I have visited those colleges. I have spoken with the students there, and I know that everyone at these colleges is committed to broader transformational change in the area of culture to make sure that we are fostering an environment which is inclusive and which focuses on non-discrimination.
But what do you say to critics who will say that these are institutions that are just too big to change in the amount of time that's actually needed to change?
I understand the skepticism, but I want to assure you and Canadians that this time it is different. We are making sure that we address each and every one of Madame Arbour's recommendations, and we are also ensuring that there is the institutional foundation for cultural change in the military. This is not only morally right, it is also operationally necessary, as we need to continue to grow the Canadian Armed Forces and reconstitute the forces for the benefit and the defense of our country.
You say that this time is different. Why is it different this time? Because even Madame Arbour had acknowledged that her report may very well just sit on a shelf. So why, as the Minister of National Defense, are you saying this is different? Why should anybody believe the government this time?
Again, I understand that skepticism, Mike. The reason it's different this time, Mike, is because at each and every step in this process, we have continued to come forward and have an open dialogue with Canadians and with the media, in fact, so that we are held accountable. So quarterly updates to the media from my officials, a report that I tabled today where I outlined a roadmap, a detailed roadmap on how we are going to implement each and every one of those 48 recommendations, the appointment of an external monitor who's going to oversee the implementation of the recommendation and who's going to come back and report to Canadians in April as to the progress. This is the type of change that is occurring in addition to the substantive changes already underway, such as building up the Sexual Misconduct Response Center, such as improving the process for general and flag officers' promotions, such as ensuring that military colleges are including diversity and inclusion in their training. Those changes are already underway, Mike, and there is much more to come as we implement the recommendations of the Arbour report.
And we can't wait to check in with you again on a quarterly basis on these. Minister of National Defence, Anita Anand, thank you so much for joining us here today.